Hello, US1, and happy St. Patrick's Day, Sláinte. This is Percy. You kind of see Percy. Percy, he is the newest member of our family, so kind of say hello, Percy. Um, so, ready for your joke of the day? So, here it is. So, you know what my favorite thing about atheism is? It's a non-profit organization. Yeah, that's as good as it gets. Um, so here's what I have for you guys today is today's lesson. So we're going to continue on talking about slavery and more from the slave experience here once the slave arrives in North America. So I have two readings for you from Solomon Northrop. Both readings have questions. Don't worry about submitting those questions to me, but I do want you to do those questions, and those questions can be added right to your notebook because they're kind of like notes on the reading and that type of stuff. Percy's getting a little frisky. Um, Also, you do have homework, so make sure you do that homework. That homework talks about slavery in New Jersey, what slavery was like here. There are questions for that, so that is something I do want you to do. Also, don't forget the do now. I think you'll find that interesting as you'll read the Tar Baby story, which is from Uncle Remus, and it features characters from Splash Mountain. So if you ever wondered what the heck is going on Splash Mountain, now you'll have a better idea. For the do now, make sure you do that because that's how we're taking attendance. For that, handle that kind of like it's a journal question. So give me a good solid paragraph on your thoughts on that and submit that there with the do now. So yeah, so you've got the two readings. You also have the video of me going through some notes with those readings and the homework. Other than that, have a great St. Patrick's Day. If you have questions, feel free to email me, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever it is you are watching this. Um, so today, talk a little bit more about slavery, kind of build on where we left off in class. So hopefully, as you remember, the Middle Passage is the journey slaves took from freedom in Africa to slavery in North America. It's called the Middle Passage because it is the middle leg of the triangular trade. So this is where the dehumanization process begins for slaves. Um, as you can see, it is a horrible experience from looking at the data you have here on your screen, which I'm not going to read because you can read it yourselves. But just to explain some things here, the idea of loose pack versus tight pack is exactly what it sounds like. This was a philosophical argument amongst slave ship captains determining how to maximize the most profit from the slave trade. So the thought was you only get paid for how many slaves walk off your ship wherever it is you're going. So the thought was with loose pack, you'll take fewer slaves at the beginning of the journey, knowing that some slaves are going to die from this experience. This is a horrible experience. It's traumatic on the body. There's not enough resources, etc. So loose pack, you start with fewer slaves, so then there's more space, more food, more fresh air, less potential for disease, that type of thing. And the thought is, if you're starting with less, maybe more will survive the journey, a higher percentage will survive the journey, and you'll have more money to be made when you get wherever you're going. Tight pack is the opposite. Since you know some are going to die anyway, you take as many slaves as you physically can hold in a slave ship, with the thought, yes, more are going to die now because the conditions are worse. But since you're starting with more, maybe you'll end with more and maximize your profit that way. Again, this is, the cruel, cold financial calculations of this. This is a large money making endeavor. And so, again, to maximize your profit, these were philosophical debates that people had. Um, and so, this also to remember that that all this kind of changes after 1808 because in the Constitution, the transcontinental slave trade is made illegal. So now slaves cannot be directly imported in from Africa or the Caribbean. Slaves have to be acquired within the United States, which changes the slave trade. So now, since you have a supply and demand issue, the supply is going down, demand is going to go up through cotton production, so prices of slaves go up. And so again, all this is kind of factored in to this procedure. This image here is a schematic of a slave ship. So all those images you see on there, those are people. And so that top image would fit directly on top of that image below, again, that 18 to 24 inches in between. And so you can see this is maximizing every square inch to get as much profit out of this as possible. And these are people. And again, as part of that dehumanization process, slaves were not seen as people. They were just cargo. They were cattle to be wedged into a ship. And again, their well being was not regarded, up until the point of how much money can I make, from this transaction. Upon arrival in the New World or the West Indies, the United States, wherever it is they are going, um, you have the auction, the inspection process. And so there's a reading on this by Solomon Northrop. So give that a read. He talks about the auction process from the standpoint of a slave. Solomon Northrop was a man who was born free in New York State, was tricked into traveling down to Washington, D.C., was captured and sold into slavery in Washington, D.C. He was kidnapped, basically. And then for 12 years was a slave in Louisiana before, with the help of a white man, he was able to get word to his family in New York State, and they were able to come down and acquire his freedom. So he talks about this because he experienced it. And so some of the things he talks about is that slaves have their heads shaved, again, to kind of trick the buyer. Again, this is all about maximizing profit. So when you shave someone's head, you can't tell if they're losing their hair or not losing their hair. You can't tell if they have gray hair or they don't have gray hair. Again, all these things, a younger slave is going to get you more money. So you need to trick the buyer into thinking that a slave is younger than they are. And that's why you oil them down to make them look more muscular, kind of like professional wrestlers do, that type of stuff. Um, Tar is burned into the skin to hide any scars or gashes received through mistreatment during this process. From there, slaves are purchased. The auction process also talks about, what I should mention is that this is, again, where slaves are finally kind of broken apart. Slaves will travel on the Middle Passage with their family members, with people they knew. Usually they're kidnapped together. They're kidnapped as groups, so they know the people they're on that ship with. They speak a similar language. Um, it's at the auction process where slaves are broken apart. It's where mothers are separated from their children, husbands are separated from their wives, family members are separated, and they'll never see each other again. Again, part of that trauma that you just never recover from. In terms of work, and we talked about this in class, major staple crops for slaves: rice, tobacco, cotton, sugar. Um, Men and women will work side by side, and the phrase was they work from can to can't. You work from when you can see to when you can't see anymore. Um, there is another reading for you to read also by Solomon Northrop that talks about life in a southern plantation, about the typical daily work. So give that a read. You'll get a sense of, from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, what was daily life like for a slave. The image you see there is that of a cotton gin. Cotton gins came in all different shapes and sizes. It was invented by Eli Whitney. Eli Whitney, ironically, invented it to try to make the life of a slave easier. Instead, it makes slavery a ton more profitable, thus making slave life harder. So the way it kind of works is a cotton ball is the flower on a cotton plant. So it's kind of like a bush. And inside that white cotton ball are the seeds. So before, you'd have to pick the cotton ball off the plant, and then you'd have to take a whole bunch of time pulling the cotton apart to try to get the seeds out, and you had to save the seeds so you can plant more cotton. What the cotton gin does is you take the cotton ball, you just throw it into that machine. You see there's a crank there. You would turn the crank. There are gears inside. So as you turn the crank, the cotton is pulled by the gears. So the gears is pulling the cotton apart. As the cotton is being pulled apart, the seeds then become released and they drop to the bottom. And you see there's a little door under the bottom of that, which they can gather the seeds and plant more cotton. So that's how the cotton gin worked. And cotton is big money. So you look at this again, although by the time you get to 1800, which is just about when the cotton gin is invented, actually cotton gin is like 1790s, cotton only made up 7% of U.S. exports. By the time you get to 1860, it's 58% of U.S. exports. So cotton is big money. Cotton is king. And so Cotton's profits, it also feeds the northern industry, right? So northern factories need cotton. Again, that American system created by Henry Clay. So northerners need cotton, southerners grow cotton. Both economies are connected to this. And so, segueing to slavery in the North, in particular in New Jersey, you have another reading which is actually homework about slavery in New Jersey. And it does a very good job kind of giving you the timeline of how slavery worked in New Jersey. So every northern state had slaves. New Jersey not accepted in that. Um, New Jersey, though, is the last state in the North to free its slaves. And you see gradual emancipation there in 1804. So the laws passed in 1804, but as you'll read for homework, that there were rules and stipulations. For example, nobody's actually freed in 1804. The first person freed under that act is not freed until 1825. So you'll read about that for homework. So again, today, that's it for today. Tomorrow, what we'll do, or next class, I should say, we'll kind of pick up on, how do you kind of defend this practice? So again, remember, you've got homework tonight, right, to, talk about slavery in New Jersey. Don't forget the do now assignment, because that is your attendance for this class. Hope all is well. Stay safe and smart, and talk to you guys later.